Yeah, so it was very interesting. I mean, what was it like leading a country? It was scary initially because when I started that process, there was no plan, there was no strategy, there was no IT system, and suddenly, within weeks of the first vaccines arriving in the country, I was asked by government, but I wasn't going to say no, to lead the team of people that would coordinate the whole national vaccination program. So lots of lessons to be learned from what happened, but certainly the issue was of bringing people together, creating an appropriate team, establishing a shared vision, which was critically important, articulating a clear strategy, a clear implementation plan, and that drove everything we did. And we focused on KPIs and indicators of performance, so that it was very much data driven. And some very bright young graduates drove the data analysis underneath that, which was really significant. But the other thing we learned on a national level was by bringing people together and creating that national shared vision. So it was a national collective. So Ireland achieved 97% vaccination of its adults in that first run of COVID, which was incredible, which is one of the leading countries in the world in that way. But that wasn't just the system, that was the reaction of the whole community itself. Interestingly, we learned that trusted voices were particularly important. And we went to university. So some of the leading voices that would appear in our media that explained the situation, that explained changes, and explained the necessity of public response were articulate academics in the areas of immunology, clinical science, and so on. So universities really played an important role in instilling public confidence in terms of how to deal with the issues of an emergency for a start, because what I think incredible was the response right around the world of university systems and individual universities. And I think then knowing what worked and what didn't work in terms of a fully online experience for students. So I think it's often described as an unfortunate but hugely interesting compressed experiment. So innovation had to happen at an incredible pace. But the experiment happened. There were massive statistics given the scale of all of this, and there was this huge learning experience. And I think we're still learning from it, both in terms of the innovations in learning, the use of learning technologies, but also the mental health aspects for students themselves as well. We're still learning from this. But in our own university, I suppose, I was president at Dublin City University for the first 6 months of COVID and right through the first phase of lockdowns. So there was the whole issue of bringing together the senior management team, both the academic leaders, but also the operational leaders and people in HR and so on. We anticipated COVID at the university. We were very fortunate, one could say as well, that we had started to embrace very deeply digital learning a few years before. We created the National Institute for Digital Learning. We appointed Ireland's first professor of digital learning whom we hired from New Zealand, a fantastic guy called Professor Mark Brown. So the whole culture of taking on board digital learning, digital assessment, online assessment, academics had been embracing that. So when the very sudden lockdown instruction came, and when the transition to an online experience for students happened, our academic community was fairly well prepared. So it wasn't such a shock to the system. I don't think we'll ever go back to business as usual. I think there are two major movements happening in recent years, one related to COVID. I think the whole question about online or not, and this whole hype, which was about, the brick universities were gone, it would be all online. I think there's a much more nuanced understanding now, and certainly the synchronous and asynchronous use of online learning is much better understood, and that it's more suited to some situations rather than others. So I think there's been a massive learning, and that's still happening. I think the other major change for universities worldwide is that transition from, the function of universities being about a dissemination of knowledge, creation of talent, almost a two-pillar university around education and research. Now, most significantly is this notion that the university must engage with society and must be of value to society. And I think there's that realization present now. There's one of my favorite quotes is from a book, Higher Education in 2040, written by Bert van der Zwaan, who was the former rector of University of Utrecht. And he says the university of the future will derive its right to existence from being active in the world and producing knowledge for the world. And it's that notion that public legitimacy will derive from that engagement. And of course, it's very linked to the whole issue of funding of universities. But universities now have that third mission, that issue of engagement and adding value to society, which wasn't clear in the past. But over recent decades, that to me is the major change in universities. And I think it's right across the world.